Welcome back to yet another episode of the ERG Movement podcast. We are all about forward movement in the ERG space, and we bring dope people on here who've done dope things with employee resource groups. And this episode is not an exception to that. We have Nuna Atadja. You know what? I'm just going to let you introduce yourself, give us some background and how you got into the ERG space.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me and hosting me on the ERG Movement podcast. I have been a fan of yours for so long and just I feel honored to be in this space and to be able to share my experiences within the ERG space. How I got into ERG, I was working at Twitter as a program manager on our real estate and workplace team and worked really closely with the ERGs to produce on-site activations and events for their temple or heritage month. So Black History Month, Lunar New Year, Latinx Heritage Month, etc. And I just loved how vibrant, how beautiful, how passionate the communities that were representing their culture and their experience and lived experience every day were, and had to get more involved. I'd always been, involved and a member of the various ERGs, but I wanted to take that one step further. And so began volunteering more and more, and then eventually transitioned into a leadership position for Blackbirds. And Blackbirds is the ERG at Twitter for Black employees and those with lived experiences, along with the allies of that community. So, yeah, that's how I got into the community. And then I think something that's really unique about me is I started in a leadership position for the ERG first as a San Francisco lead, and then expanding into finance, and then finance and operations, and then all the things. But then also, I had the opportunity to also carve my role and move my real life job in the space of people experience and inclusion diversity. And so I was able to leverage a lot of the experiences I was gaining leading the ERG to be able to pivot and transition to program manage for our people and inclusion diversity teams. So I have the opportunity to be inside the ERG and also like manage all of the ERG. So it's definitely been great to be on both sides and excited to chat more today.
Yes, when I say you've already mentioned so many things that I'm like, "Ooh, I'm really excited to get into that." I think starting off with your role when you were with the real estate team, so you were working with ERGs in general. I think that even now, like post-pandemic, now that we're kind of back in office, a lot of people are curious how they can best leverage that team. What are some tips that you would give from the other side on how to best work with that team?
Ooh, that's really great question. I think engage with them. Like, I think sometimes you don't even know who they are. They don't know who you are. So establishing a sort of relationship with that team is definitely a first step. And then outlining what your goals are for your ERG and how you believe that team can help you achieve those. So, for example, for our Asian ERG, Twitter Asians, we would sit down with them at the beginning of the year and go through their calendar of events and where and how they wanted to show up. And show up could look like a lot of different things. We would have a huge Lunar New Year celebration in the office, decorate the space, invite lion dancers. The menu for the food that day would be different, and programming as well. We would have things for Diwali, we would have things for Asian Heritage Month. And so those are the some type of activations we'd have on site. We'd also do things within our snack program. And I would say with that real estate team, there's a lot of low hanging fruit and things that they already do that they can just make a little bit more inclusive or a little bit more diverse or a little bit more intentional. And so going to them with a proposal of, hey, you spend this money on your snacks every day. Can we provide a Asian owned coffee vendor or an Asian owned snack company? And so those are some of the ways that we engaged. And then it really was a win-win, no-brainer from our team perspective because we wanted to increase some of our goals as an organization was to increase our diversity spend. And then we could also support and uplift and help people feel represented and included in the company and drive belonging by having fun moments and having activations throughout the year.
I love that. And as we're approaching API month, this is already like extremely, extremely relevant and lots of great tips there. Curious then, what was it that made you say, I've been involved in the ERGs. I think I'm ready to take it to the next level. Was there like a moment or an event?
I think I've always led from like a servant heart. I studied hospitality and tourism management. And so I've always been very committed to serving and creating amazing experiences for people. And so that's how I got onto the real estate team. And as soon as I arrived at Twitter, the Blackbirds community, it lifted me, empowered me, the programming, the professional development. Like I received so much from that space. And so I could give back in that way. Another thing that was particular to me is I love community. I love community service. And that was something that I was seeing that could be more emphasized, more utilized within Blackbirds. And so I felt like I had something to offer and something to provide and insight and value to bring. And so it kind of was like a marriage of moments. They had an opportunity or had an opening. I was feeling I feel like I could give. And it really happened during the pandemic. And when things were shifting, priorities were shifting, I really wanted to continue to add value within my role and then outside of the things that I was doing. And so that's when I made that decision to join leadership.
And once you did, you said that you were leading the San Francisco chapter. First of all, what was involved in that role? And then secondly, how did you work with the other chapter leads also too?
So when I was serving as the San Francisco chapter lead, San Francisco was our largest office, is where our HQ was.
Mm.
But because of that, there were so many different teams that sat in that office. And oftentimes they were very engineering heavy, maybe public policy heavy. And so, we would oftentimes feel like the Black community in the office was disconnected and less engaged as other offices that were actually smaller, like New York, like Atlanta, like DC, like London. And so it was a huge opportunity, but not heavily or not being resourced, not being imagined strategically so that people could feel connected, especially coming from different walks of life. And, something we really wanted to emphasize was the intersectionality in all lived experiences. And so in certain offices, you had certain professions and certain background, but we wanted to really celebrate kind of that diverse background, diverse intersections that made that San Francisco office so big. And so that's what my role was really about, is just trying to create community and make the office feel a little bit smaller. And a lot of that actually during the pandemic. And so we hosted town halls where we would just come and sit together and, sometimes vent, sometimes crack jokes, sometimes, share resources and really just share the safe space for each other. Another thing that I did, which was not just for the San Francisco community, but for the wider community, is start a book club. There's more than one ERG event. It's not always the panel. It's not always the happy hour. Like there's a lot of different ways you can engage with people. And I wanted to see myself. I love reading. I'm a reader. I'm like a little bit of a nerd. I wanted to see that. And I wanted a place in the community for that. And so I took it upon myself to create that alongside with a lot of great people and was able to reach folks that we hadn't seen before, that we hadn't seen engaging in our events that we had done before. And so was really proud of the reach we were able to accomplish by, having a little bit of unconventional approaches and different types of programming for our members. And then your second question was,
How did your role as a San Francisco chapter lead interact with the other location chapter leads?
yeah, so I think the one thing I'll say is that's something that we actually played a lot around with. At the time, we were decentralized. So each location had a lead. And we'd come together and meet as like a leadership team wide across, and then like the co-chairs and like the other chairs, like marketing chairs. But then as the pandemic was going on, all of our programming was virtual. So everything was available to everybody. So a lot of that like faction and separation started to kind of go away, and like lines became more blurred, but also for good reason. And like things became a lot more accessible. Programming was available to a lot of different people in a lot of different regions and actually helped us in our global reach as well.
Mm.
So yeah, we would have weekly meetings and touch bases with like all the different leads. And then, but oftentimes we would just be supporting each other's programming or like just thinking of group ideas across the board for everybody.
What were some of your favorites when it comes to like now moving into a remote first world? What were some of your favorite things that came out of this?
So I feel like I've mastered the whole have a DJ on a Zoom call thing, like quarantine DJ, because, especially during really tough times, it was just amazing to be able to sit, maybe work, or maybe, have lunch and be in community and fellowship with our community. One of the events we had was in partnership with our interfaith ERG Twitter faith, and we called it Praise Break. And it was like gospel music throughout the years, just to have an uplifting moment. We've also had a couple events. We call them Love to Hear It. And it's basically like Twitter Blackbirds version of verses and would line up different, discographies and different themes and just going head to head. And the chat would be going wild. And, just using music is just such a beautiful way to connect people, especially around the world. And so those are some of my favorite events and some of my favorite outcomes of kind of that remote first is being able to still have like vibe and energy through like DJs and different entertainment that way.
So I have to ask exactly how does that work with putting together an event like that? Because that sounds super cool, but I think a lot of people they get like overwhelmed at the execution. They're like, I just don't know how I would do that. Let's
Yeah.
go with the love to hear it events.
Yeah. So I would say first, see if you have a team at your company that has experience in doing that would be able to lend a hand or support. A lot of experiential marketing teams, maybe your internal events team, your internal communications teams. For example, you have a company all hands, so they are familiar with Zoom or Teams or whatever you use. Maybe they have an AV or an IT person who can support. We had the blessing at Twitter being a larger company to have, AV support. We had an internal events team, and so we could heavily leverage those relationships. But I
Mm.
would say don't make things any harder. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to know everything. That being said, I know a lot of other companies are smaller or startups, or it's very just all hands on deck, rolling up your sleeves. And yes, like the technical kind of things can feel a little bit daunting. I think especially because of the pandemic, Zoom and Google Meet and all these places have really created like pretty straightforward ways in which like someone can plug in and play music and it's pretty good. So like there's a lot of tutorials online on YouTube and like you can find on how to do that. And I would definitely say start small and easy. Love to Hear It was like a head to head music battle, people's muting and unmuting a lot of different components, but maybe like start your next ERG meeting or all hands with, a playlist that you make and just like see that, the reaction, see the vibe, see how people are reacting to things. And then maybe you can have, okay, maybe we're going to invite someone or a DJ to play and they will also know how to hook up into Zoom and how to have the music and the feed coming through. And then maybe you can go into the whole, music battle situation. So I would say like use the resources that you have available to you, start small, and really just it's all relative to your community and the group that you're serving.
Oh, I am so excited to hopefully start seeing more ERGs doing events like that. Because you're right, music is so powerful. We did a collaboration event earlier this year with different Black ERGs, and so many people just like being in the main room with the DJ going. Music, yeah, I love that point. Okay. Well, also too, you just mentioned a really cool collaboration event that you all did with your interfaith, which not a lot of companies have interfaith ERGs, but even for those that do, I hear even less about them collaborating. So that was already like a really dope example that you just gave. What are some other collaborations that you've seen come to life?
Oh my goodness. I have so many that come to mind. And I will just say at Twitter specifically, we were encouraged, almost incentivized to collaborate. And I think it's because we saw with inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, intersectionality is the core of that. No one, wears one experience. Everybody has multiple personas, multiple backgrounds. And so our idea team would even amplify or support or even add additional resources if we were to collaborate with other ERGs. So there was like an outsized impact and also incentive to do so. So if there's any ERG program managers who are listening, I feel like that's a great step to help, like, hey, we'll give you a little additional budget if you guys are willing to co-collaborate on this event. I also
Mhm.
think having really great examples or models then to show and use on it as an example, like be really intentional about kind of that first collaboration that you do versus kind of going for every, slapping on a community just because you want more budget or whatever it is. I think really thinking thoughtfully and strategically about those initial collaborations will make a lot of sense. Some of the ones that we've done, I mean, we've done so many. We've done a lot with our women's group, Twitter Women, for Black Women Equal Pay Day. We did events with our disability ERG, Twitter Able around, you know, mental health and the Black community. We've done lots of events with Twitter Alas, which is our Latinx community, because of course those communities are oftentimes interchangeable. And so we do music events, DJ events, book clubs, educational events about, the indigenous cultures within Latin America. We would have events, like I shared with our interfaith group, as there's a lot of times, a lot of within different religions, a lot of overlap within the Black community. And I would say, I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure we had a collaboration with every single ERG that we had, if not almost all. But yeah, I think, especially when we were in the office, a lot of the ones that we could incorporate food as well were always really fun.
What are some examples with the food then?
Yeah, so I think again, like with Latinx Heritage Month, just like the amazing, interpretations of like mofongo or like, I love plantains. So anything plantains is like my bag. And just like all like just a lot of these beautiful recipes that you could see across like the African diaspora in many different countries. And so those are always my most favorite and like memorable moments in the office.
Definitely a foodie, so I can relate 100%. Okay, so with events, those were happening. What were some other ways that you were engaging members outside of just a live event?
That's a great question. So at Twitter, we utilize Slack for our internal communication. And so we had a very heavily utilized Slack group for our Blackbirds community. And then we actually had groups for the smaller locations or communities. So Blackbirds New York, Blackbirds London. And then sometimes we'd have like interest groups like our book club or gamers, sneakerheads, whatever. And so a lot of communication, a lot of just community was built within those Slack groups. I'll share though, outside of my our ERG, another ERG that utilized Slack really well that I wanted to share is our Outlast group had a really great idea where they would have a weekly segment. And so like every Friday or every Monday, they would have a Wordle and it would, somehow be incorporated with the Latinx community. And it was just fun. It was a game. It was like an entertaining kind of like 5-minute break where people could interact and engage in the Slack channel. Slack was also a huge part of our events because we'd have a lot of conversation in the Slack channel that could exist, after the event. Maybe you'd post a recording and people would react. When depressing news would happen within the United States or around the world, Slack would oftentimes be a safe place where people could give their reactions or give how they're feeling in that moment. So definitely utilizing Slack. And then of course, because we're Twitter, we had Twitter, we had a very strong Twitter presence. I think almost over 250,000 followers. And so, building that external, like wider Black and tech community was really important to us and highlighting what we were doing, our members, community partners we were supporting on our Twitter page was really great. And then, like I said before, I was really passionate about community impact and community service. And so actually trying to provide volunteer opportunities for our ERG members to participate in was also something, outside of like the traditional event that we tried to do to help build community and, impact our community.
We're gonna definitely touch on the volunteer piece because that's coming up a lot lately. But I don't even know which one to start with. There's also the social media aspect, which you are iconic with. Truly, like that was one of my first introductions into ERGs when I learned about ERGs, and I'm like, this is amazing. Can we get more ERGs to be like Twitter Blackbirds? Like just it was the ERG. So you all did amazing at that, but it shows that you all had a strong internal community to even be able to have that external impact. So you just mentioned like with Slack, what are some of like the conversations that you would have? Like how do you feel community was built within Slack or people are feeling connected to other people and like really are champions of the work that you all are doing as ERG leaders?
Yeah, I mean, it was just like a forum, a space where people could share thoughts and ideas and exchange thoughts and ideas. And so, it really left a lot of room and space for people to freely engage. And they oftentimes did, like, hey, I went to this really great restaurant. Has anyone else been here? Or hey, I'm coming to this office. Hey, can I meet with the Black people who are there? We'd also use it to help amplify some of our programming or some professional development opportunities. Like we're going to Afrotech, we want to send a couple people fill out this form. We want to give away books from this author that we've partnered with, like this to, get a copy. So it was definitely a place where we could, do many things of sorts. And a lot of those conversations were really organic and just like talking to your community, talking like almost like the cookout, like the virtual cookout and lots of memes. I mean, to your like what was said, I mean, what happens in Slack stays in Slack, but like lots of memes, humor, and tweets. Like sometimes it would just be that exhale, that, you know, just safe space. Like, there'd be the company chat and then there'd be the Blackbirds chat. And, it was just like a great place for us to feel free.
Oh, I love that so much. For those who are newer to the ERG space, what is like the value in being able to go to a space and say, like, this is for Black employees, or even to be able to say, I'm coming to this office. I would love to meet up with the other Black employees. What benefit did you see that bring for members, but even for you personally to have a space like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like camaraderie, there's a lot of understanding. Again, that like trust and safety of maybe you're new, maybe you're looking to build community, you're looking to something that we implemented that I would always share is setting up some sort of buddy program or coffee chat program. And so in Slack, there's actually an integration where you can set up coffee chats. And so it'll take all the members in the group and randomize them to meet with each other on a certain cadence. And so we have that. And so that was creating, you know, randomized organic connections amongst the ERG. And we had over, including allies, 1,200 members, which is insane. The thing is, like you mentioned something of like just the Black people. It's interesting because our Slack channel was open. Our did also include allies. It's very interesting though, because I feel like because it was so like enthused and it was so heavily used, like folks know where to lean in and where to like let things go. And so there still was elements of like, again, true carefreeness, even though it was an open channel. And I see, benefits in both. I worked and engaged like at other companies where they have a closed channel, just for those with the lived experience. I've seen open channels, and I think both directions can serve you well. But I definitely think having a landing spot and having like ongoing conversation is really important when you're trying to build your community, because not everybody can come to an event. At the end of the day, ERG work and ERG programming is on top and additional to the work that we do. And so it's just great to have a place to plug in and stay connected.
I'm a big fan of allies in ERG channels. And that is so great to hear that you all like incorporated that, but it didn't take away from the safe space of the environment.
And I think
That's
like perfect, right? So there's always moments and that's where like, it's just a starting place, it's just a starting ground. Like there's always a time for a coffee chat, there's always a time for a huddle, a DM, you
Mhm.
know? So like it's almost like this is just like the community square, and then you kind of take it and run how you will.
Obsessed. Okay. And you also mentioned you all had a really big social media presence on Twitter. Even I saw some posts on LinkedIn too. So you all clearly were having an impact on the broader world. And you mentioned community service too. What are some examples of some initiatives that came up?
Yeah, I mean, community service has been like interwoven with Blackbird since the inception. And I think it's been amazing what they've been able to do throughout the years and history of Blackbirds. And some of like the larger things, partnering with the Black Panther movie and, sending students in Detroit to see the movie and meet Chadwick Boseman. Like that was like chills, like literally like the most amazing thing that I feel like that we've had the opportunity to have a hand in. And, from partnering in our Twitter Ghana office and having opportunities with partnering with Afrochella. We worked with Black Girls Code, we worked with Social Works, we worked with Dreamwakers in very different capacities where, either we could provide grants. We oftentimes would have partner and have events with these groups so that we would amplify their work and their message, or we'd provide volunteer opportunities. So we'd have either virtual. One of the groups we worked with, 826 Valencia in San Francisco, was a writing workshop for students in San Francisco's public school system. And so we'd have Blackbirds members volunteer their time and work in these workshops with these students and learning to craft their story and own their Blackness and, really creating tangible impact. We had biannual Twitter for Good Days, which was our company-wide philanthropy efforts. And we would oftentimes partner, with Dev Mission. I feel like there's so many different organizations that we got to partner with. And like even globally, we had an office in our Brazil office. And it's actually interesting. Like the story of Brazil is beautiful and complicated and so interesting. And, we had some of our senior leadership within the Brazil office intentionally because we wanted to amplify and really push leadership across the company to invest in diversifying the Brazil office and having the office reflect like the actual country. And so we had a lot of events and collaborations and partnerships with nonprofits there, collaborated with nonprofits in the UK. So yeah, I mean, it was always a privilege to be able to do that and to use our platform, be it our Twitter handle or our influence or our event space or our money to kind of further the efforts of these groups that were already doing such amazing work.
That is incredible. And I definitely hope that everyone's listening is taking away all like you just listed like maybe like 7 different opportunities and there's so many more, but even then that was just such a good like thought starter for so many people. I love all of those things. A lot of pushback though that I can imagine people will say as they hear this is we don't have the money or something like that.
We had budget, and that's rare. ERG leaders were compensated at Twitter, which is very rare. And so I say that and I speak and I talk about these things, knowing that what we had at Twitter and the programs that we had were not the norm. And we celebrate that and we want that to be the norm and we want to evangelize that and create that norm for everybody else. But I recognize that many folks don't have opportunity to provide grants, or the grant one is interesting because I know you talk about a lot about like what should ERGs do with their money at the end of the year? Because oftentimes we find coming to the financial standpoint, ERGs oftentimes may front load some of their spending, like for Blackbirds, Black History Month's in February. So all of our spending happens there. And then, they go quiet for the rest of the year. And, oftentimes ERGs have pools of money that they haven't used. And at least at Twitter and, across the board, a lot of times it's like you use it, you lose it. And also having that spend helps justify that budget to continue to be created and resourced each year. So I know you've done like content around how to spend your budget at the end of the year or how to utilize your budget. And I'll touch really quickly on those. So we love sending books. I think it's an easy way to get professional development resources, also just enrichment overall. And so if it was a gift card, if it was an actual physical book, we'd love sending that at the end of the year. Sometimes we just have like a kickback event and we would pay for a DJ to come and we'd call it a gratitude gathering. And a DJ would be playing and it's the end of the year and we're celebrating. And maybe we'd give DoorDash coupons to people so they could have lunch and celebrate with us. Another aspect is Giving Tuesday happens first week of December or last week of November. Great time to take that ERG extra funds. We have contributed to so many different organizations across the year. Some of the larger ones like NESB, sending a local chapter in Denver to attend the conference by in part through our donation. So like that can be like a natural way. And, if your company has a philanthropy team or an ESG team or, somebody who does those type of things, you can lean in and connect with them and understand kind of the operations of that. Because I know sometimes that can be a challenge, but it's funny because everybody, I included and our ERG included, is always so like all about the money and the budget. And then at the same time, at the end of the year, it's like crickets and like the money's there. And so it's funny from an operations standpoint. And I think I would always say is like planning out your events, spacing out your events, having quarterly check-ins with your events lead or your idea team or your ERG program manager to just make sure that your programming and your content and your spend is consistent throughout the year and it's not front loaded or in the front or the back or during your tentpole month, and you're really using your resources as wisely as you can. And if for whatever reason you can't, you have contingency or backup plans. Or there was even some years at Twitter where certain ERGs could give to other ERGs that were looking to have events that needed a little bit more cash. And so there's a lot of ways to be creative with that, but definitely understand the constraints that exist, especially in where we are right now. I feel like ERG budgets are getting slashed and deprioritized. And so you really do have to be creative. And so, yes, on the one side, like definitely I'm all for like thoughtful planning and strategic planning throughout the year, coming up with contingencies and ways to use money, if it comes to that at the end of the year. And then lastly, like there are a lot of things you can do for free. And it sounds like annoying to say, but it's true. Like there also have been times in the history of Twitter where they didn't have, big budgets and they didn't have those things, and really just communing together, Slack, all hands, even having professional development opportunities, like inviting different leadership in the company to come and speak and talk about their experiences. In Blackbirds, oftentimes, like a lot of folks would want to come and speak and come and talk about what they've done, just to have that audience and just to have those ears. And so I would say like leverage the internal relationships you have, maybe some of your own external personal relationships that you might have. You might know somebody who has a really cool job who would want to come and speak to your ERG. So there's a lot of, I feel like ERG leaders are the most creative people in the world. And they make things happen out of nothing. So yeah, I think anything is definitely possible, especially with, the support of, those around you, and with communities like this that help empower and, provide resources and space to grow.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I remember in the pandemic, I definitely found a lot of people on Clubhouse, and I was like, you all clearly know what you're talking about. So how about you come here? You've never spoken in front of corporate employees, I bet. Even like paying them, it's just a completely different price rate than like paying tens of thousands for one speaker. So I'm right there with you. And I think it's notable that while you all had budget, you had impact too. Like the things that you all are doing and the way that you're using your budget is so like, I don't just want to say strategic because that doesn't even do it justice, but you can see really how it's a value add to your ERG. It's not just randomly taking in, just like donating it all, but you're using it in a meaningful way. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Now, I have to ask about the swag boxes because I'm so obsessed with them. When I saw a picture, like my jaw dropped. So tell everyone a little bit about the Blackbird swag boxes.
Yes. Where to begin? I mean, everybody loves swag. Everybody loves gifts. Everybody loves things, especially Black folks. Like t-shirt, mug, I need it. And, I think particularly in the pandemic, we saw organizations leaning towards more experiential kind of marketing packages because they couldn't connect and they couldn't have in-person, events and things of that sort. And so it was kind of like an easy way to reach folks, especially globally. And so with that, we were provided that direction from our inclusion diversity team. And, when we started our planning for our Heritage Month, we really thought intentional, like from the packaging of the box, the colors, the logo, the card that was put inside, every vendor being Black, which is not as easy as you would think, especially when you think about economies of scale and sending it like all over the world. And so, yeah, I mean, just really grateful to have been able to create beautiful boxes that were able to create joy and spark, inspiration and create conversation around the world and within our community. I will say, like, it's something that is a nice to have. It doesn't have to happen. And so I know it can be difficult being on the other side, like being like, damn, when are we going to send our box? Or we don't have budget for that box. I mean, I definitely will say it was a huge product of the pandemic, because I think prior to that, we always had done swag. We'd always had t-shirts and all the things, but then we would pass them out kind of sporadically throughout events or different activations. But we really were in our bag in these boxes over the past 3 years, and really proud of what we have been able to do. But I also think that there's some, coming from the financial and operations standpoint, when you think about return on investment with those boxes, some of the thoughts that we had were around, instead of having one really amazing box with all these amazing items that obviously are high value and come at a cost, maybe having different smaller things throughout the year. Or maybe when a new member joins our ERG, we send them like an onboarding package that has, even if it's a sticker, a bookmark, like you would be shocked about what touches people. And yes, we had some really cool items in our boxes, but we've also done really, easy, low-key things as well. Something I really loved too was one of the ERG's Twitter Asians, after the event that they would host, if they had certain volunteers or speakers, they would send that person just a thank you card in the mail. Like, you would be surprised, and like a sticker and this is not expensive packaging, but like that in itself, like I was on that panel, I was on the receiving end, I was so grateful and it was so thoughtful. And so there are like lighter touch, smaller ways. Yeah, I mean, there's so many directions I could go with that. There's a lot of different companies right now, thankfully, that are starting to specifically cater towards like diverse and inclusive products and packaging and vendors. And so I definitely think if there's an opportunity to do that, try as much as you can. Art, I think, is another space that's heavily underutilized in ERG communities and communities at large, and is another great way digitally that you can invest. And so, for example, we always collaborated with an artist each year for our Black History Month, both in the UK and the US. And so we would have an artist. We had one in Brazil, one in Nigeria, one in the UK, create a banner for our Twitter page. And we, would have an artist create Zoom backgrounds for our members. It's like an easy, no shipping gifts that you can give to folks around the world that's accessible and easy to access. So definitely here for the boxes, love experiential. It's actually like low-key my passion. Like, I love making people smile. I love curating and creating and having that eye for what will make people. And I did that not only for Blackbirds, but in my job. Like, I was like, I am going to give everybody a box for everything. But I know, because I've done it, it's expensive and it takes a lot of investment. And so just here for all ways of making people feel great. You know what I mean? In whatever fashion or way.
And for context, for those listening, what was in the box?
Yeah, I mean, so throughout the years, we've had different things. We've earned your hoodie, your sweatpants, like with our custom branded logo. We've had, certain teas from global, influences. We've done a bonnet and a do-rag, which was really fun and created a lot of conversation. We've done super loud, like printed socks and just like different like clothing and accessories. We, like I said, have always tried to incorporate artwork. So we like provide like almost like a little picture or something that you can frame and put in your home. We've done candles, Love Notes, amazing Black owned brand. I should be naming the brand so we can give them a little bit of a shine. But yeah, we've really done everything. And again, really grateful that we've been able to do that. But also, and even like with our own strategy, like we ourselves knew as we are coming into this next year that like we would have to transition and pivot and kind of reimagine how we were going to do this. And like some of the things I said before of, okay, maybe the boxes are smaller, but so yeah.
I am so obsessed still with that. Even like you said, if a company can't do it all, starting with pieces. Okay, this has been as incredible, if not more incredible, than I even thought it would be. And there's definitely going to have to be a part two. But one question that we ask all of our guests on here, with the ERG movement being about forward movement in the ERG space, what would you say is something that you would like to see more from ERGs, or even less potentially? Like maybe it's time to switch something up. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I would just highlight some of the things I said, like intersectionality, like collaborating with the other ERGs within your space. I think always love seeing like leadership engagement. So having that executive sponsor really be an executive sponsor. I know you also have a lot of content on how to engage with your executive sponsor and use them to the best of your ability. So I always love to see more of that. Like put that pressure on your company, light that fire underneath them. If they're really about what they say they are, like you'd be surprised just by having a conversation what you're able to achieve and accomplish. And I feel like we were able to do so much because we did that and we had that in our leadership. I would love to see a highlight more in accessibility. I feel like that is definitely a direction that DEI is facing, and it's been long underserved and much due. And, just really representing inclusion and diversity within an accessible outlook is really important. And I'd love to see that more. I would love to see more people paid. I think ERG work, you're being an advocate and a light and a community builder, and you're doing important things for the company. And so I'd love to see more companies providing incentives and compensation. So I'd love to see more of that. And I love continuing to see smaller ERGs making an impact. You would be surprised. I'll say this, like it's not only the big companies that have the biggest impact. There was a time Twitter, you know, was not always like popping or huge in terms of numbers, but in terms of impact. And like you said, just being on the outside, like we were able to still, say a lot with just what we had and the numbers we had. So don't be discouraged by the amount of people that you have in your ERG or the amount of people you have at your company, because big companies have ERGs that are quiet and that are disconnected. And that happens all the time. I think, having the right people in the right roles in the right positions at the right time can oftentimes just lead for a lot of really great things. So definitely keep at it and keep working towards growth and movement. And yeah, love to see it.
No better way to close than that. Truly, so many gems provided. Tell everyone where they can find you.
I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. Please always feel free to reach out if you have any questions, want to connect. I love to be a resource. You can also connect with me on Twitter. My handle is at Nuna Kate. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here today and just speak on this because I love ERGs. I love the work that we do. I love the Blackbirds community. It's like Blackbirds forever, despite anything. It's always going to be a badge of honor that I wear. So yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate this time.
Thank you. Hashtag Blackbirds forever. I love it.